Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session organized by the South Florida Book Festival. I'm really excited to be here. This is actually my first Facebook Live, so I had a few issues, but now everything is resolved. And thank you so much for those of you who are connected. I'm really excited about this particular event. And I want to thank the South Florida Book Festival for having me as a guest today to talk about my book, Badass Black Girl. Many thanks to the African American Research Library and Cultural Center, the Friends of OLEC, and Bank of America. All those wonderful organizations are sponsoring the live today. My name is MJ Fier. For those of you who don't know me, I am the author of Badass Black Girl, which is a book that I wrote to empower young Black readers, girls and Black women who could all use some strategies to make their life a little bit happier, particularly these days with everything going on. I know that many of you are watching this from home because of COVID, and I just want to share a little bit from the book today because I hope that my writing can bring hope, can bring fortitude to those of you who are watching me today on Facebook Live. So I'm going to start by reading a little bit from the introduction of Badass Black Girl. When I wrote the book, I wrote it, part of the reason I wrote it was because when I was growing up as a young girl in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, I was an avid reader. I read all kinds of books, novels, collections of poetry, nonfiction books. I was really into books that help with my own empowerment. And although I read books that were very, very useful, one thing that I noticed very early is that I couldn't find myself in those books. I wanted a book that would be geared toward me, a Black woman, in a Black girl at that point, a Black girl in the Caribbean. But of course, when I thought about Blackness, I did not just think about the Caribbean, but all the Black girls around the world that could have used a book that was specifically geared toward them. I later became a teacher, and I decided, well, since that book doesn't exist, or there are books like this but not enough, then I'm going to write my own book to help those who come after me. And that's how I decided to write Badass Black Girl. So there are many letters in the book addressed to the Badass Black Girl in you. And the first one, which is part of the introduction, goes like this. Dear Badass Black Girl, you are a true warrior who inherited the strength, courage, wisdom, love, and dignity of our ancestors. You stand on their shoulders carrying a history of triumph. Yes, it is true. You also carry some of the pain of yesterday's Black heroines, these creators, innovators, and agents of change. And you are faced with the tremendous struggle of the modern girl of color. But make no mistake, you are strong and you can conquer whatever challenges this world hands you. Your very existence defies history. Never forget those who broke the unjust rules society once used to limit their progress, those who fought hard to get you to this moment, those who gave light so others could find a way through dark times. Because of them, you get to walk into a restaurant through the front door, sit at the front of the bus, and cast a vote for leaders who represent your ideals. Walk in the freedom they secured for your sake. Be proud of your rich skin, and may your hair be a crown that stands tall. Be proud of your deep-rooted cultures. Be proud of the power of those who came before you. as the strength of generations will propel you forward and carry you through difficulties. Be fearless, but as you move through the world, remember, your biggest responsibility is to remain thoughtful, to honor where you come from, and to recognize you didn't simply appear and find your own voice. Alice Walker wrote, "How simple a thing it seems to me that to know ourselves as we are, we must know our mother's names." So that was from the introduction of Badass Black Girl. As I mentioned before, this book was so important for me to write because I wanted to be able to bring to the reader what I feel that I didn't get growing up, which is a book specifically addressed to a Black girl reading it. So I'm really excited that I was given the opportunity to write this book, and I'm certainly very thankful for all those who have supported it, and today, of course, particularly to the African American Research Library and Cultural Center, the Friends of ORLEC, and Bank of America for making this possible. There are many aspects of the book that I wanted to talk to you today. And I think that in order for you to understand where I come from and how this book was born, I need to talk a little bit about my own history. I was born in Haiti, in Port-au-Prince, and I was born at a time where there was a lot of chaos in Haiti, which is really any time because we have chaos in waves. In Haiti, it's a country that is difficult to live in sometimes. There is a lot of violence, but right next to this violence, there's also a lot of beauty. So very early on, I learned to appreciate that things always have two sides. You can decide to see what is really bad, or you can decide to see what is really good, or you can find a way in the middle where you look at things not with a glass half full or half empty. You just look at things for what they are. You're measured, you take a step back and say, okay, this is going on. I can't go to school today because the mob is burning down the city. Or you can say, okay, I'm home today. This is an opportunity for me to learn about other people. Why are there people in the city burning down the city? And also I could take that time to read a book and continue growing. So there was always this thinking that, yes, I'm gonna look at the bad, but I'm also going to look at the good and at the opportunities that are given to me. So that was the kind of environment that I grew up in. My family structure was also a little bit complicated. So there was chaos in the streets, but also a lot of chaos at home. And I had to find a way to navigate both. So I found out that writing helped a lot. And writing became the most important thing in my life at a very young age. I actually published my first book when I was 16, but I had been working on it for a few years. I completed the manuscript at 13, and it took me 3 years working with a teacher, and my aunt was also a teacher, so working with teachers to make the book better. I'm going to give a shout out actually to my aunt, Marlène Fièvre. She was so instrumental in helping me become a writer. And my teacher, Yannick Le Gros-Georges, who also helped develop my first book. More than she knows. I mean, she was such an inspiration for me. So I knew that in order for me to become a writer, I had to find mentors. I had to find people who could help me develop my craft. And it's one of the lessons that I give in Badass Black Girl. The idea that sometimes it's okay to try things on our own because we want to become our own people, right? But at the same time, you need to know when to surround yourself with those who can help you go forward. So I was in Haiti trying to navigate the chaos that was everywhere, the violence that was everywhere, trying to focus on the silver lining, because there's always a silver lining, whatever the situation is. And the way I was able to manage all that was through writing, becoming a thinker, really thinking about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life and how I could change the world around me for the better. And writing was really the answer to that, because through writing you can really help people understand your story, and you can teach people to write their own. So writing is helpful not only to the writer but to the person you're writing for. I started with writing fiction because it's easier, and I was a kid. Most of what I wrote was fiction. I loved adventure stories. I loved stories that kept you on the edge of your seat. So horror stories, adventure stories. So those were the stories that I wrote as well. But I always made sure that they also conveyed those ideas that were very important to me. So the main character, part of her was always me trying to understand the world, trying to see how to make the world better. Because I was growing up in Haiti, most of my settings were in Haiti, sometimes Port-au-Prince, sometimes other cities in Haiti. And I made a conscious choice to talk about what could be better for my country and what role do young people play in changing their countries. Then I went to university. My writing slowed down a little bit. I focused on school. First, I attended school in Haiti. Then I moved to the United States, where I attended Firstbury University, then Florida International University. And I became a more formal writer because I attended the creative writing program at FIU. And while I was there, I started taking classes with Dan Wakefield. And he at the time, he was teaching a very popular class, a memoir class. And for the first time, I started writing stories that had to do with me, which I never considered before, because if you know anything about Caribbean history, particularly Haitian history, you know that we've had one dictatorship after another, and speaking your mind wasn't really encouraged when I was a kid, because I grew up right after the Duvalier era, where people could lose their life if they spoke against the government, or if they were told to have spoken against the government. So the idea of writing real things about my life was unthinkable before I took that class with Dan Wakefield. And I started writing a little bit about how it was to grow up in Haiti, how it was to just be a black girl in the 90s and the early 2000s. And I was surprised by the reaction. Stories that I took for granted, people were actually really interested in. For instance, the violence in Haiti had become so normal for me that I never really thought that writing about it would make a difference or would impress anybody, because violence had become the everyday state of things in my country. So the fact that I could reveal something to a reader that was so deep and so unthinkable really affected the way I approached my writing. I'm like, oh, okay, I have a story to tell. So my first piece of nonfiction was my memoir, which I published a few years ago. I want to say 2015. So give or take 5 years ago. Then I was thinking about what my next project should be, and I started thinking about what I mentioned before, the fact that I could help people with my writing, not just by talking about things that they did not feel they were allowed to talk about. For instance, in my memoir, I talk about my family life and how difficult it was on an emotional level when your family dynamics are not really working. How do you, as a young girl, deal with it? So I talked about home violence. I talked about the relationship between family members. Very important topics when you are a young girl growing up. And thinking about what my next project was going to be, I realized that I really wanted to continue empowering people. So I decided to write a book called Happy Okay, which came right before Badass Black Girl, in which I talk a little bit about depression and anxiety. So growing up, I suffered from chronic depression, but as a kid, I thought, okay, maybe it's normal because I'm just a kid. What do I know? I feel sad all the time. I feel that I don't belong anywhere. When I became a teenager, I was still feeling that way, but when I talked about it, they told me, well, you're a teenager. What do you expect? That's what teenagers do. They get sad and they complain a lot about the way things are. So I was okay. I'm looking forward not to being a teenager anymore because I was just tired of feeling sad all the time. Then I became older. I left my teenage years behind and I realized, oh, I'm still feeling kind of low all the time. And I was having very specific ways that I could identify what kind of day I was going to have. Then that's when I finally talked to professionals and they told me, well, you suffer from chronic depression and it's nothing that has to do with your environment. It had to do with the way my brain itself was wired, and I had to learn to cope with it. And I wanted to help people who suffer from depression. How do you still manage to be happy when your brain is trying to kill you, kind of thing? Because so many days I woke up and I just didn't want to go on and move on with my life. So I wrote Happy Okay, which is the story of Paloma. It's a story in poetry, meaning that there's a dialogue between Paloma and Jose Armando, and it all happens in dialogue. So it's kind of a play in poetry format. Then I started writing Badass Black Girl, which is mostly the book that I want to talk to you guys about today, because I can say that it's the most important book, in my opinion, that I've written. So, Badass Black Girl, what is a badass black girl, right? So I consider myself a badass black girl, and I think every black girl should consider herself a badass black girl. Even when you don't feel like it, you need to know you're just badass, right? We have so much going for us. Our history has taught us that we can be who we can be, how the kind of strength that we have, that we inherited from the people before us, and the fact that we're able to live in a society that doesn't necessarily give us the appreciation that we deserve, and yet we're able to accomplish so much, says a lot about the kind of people that we are, and we're definitely badass. So badass black girl is not just me calling myself a badass black girl, but it's the reader, it's you being very badass because you're able to accomplish so much. So in this book, I included all those role models that we have, that I've had growing up, that you have right now in the year 2020, and the inspiring words that they've shared with us. So in the book, you'll find a lot of quotes. You'll find, for instance, I have a quote here from Tina Turner, singer, songwriter, actress. Even if you don't know her, you've heard of her. That's the kind of fame that she has. And she says, I didn't have anybody really, no foundation in life. So I had to make my own way. Always, from the start, I had to go out in the world and become strong to discover my mission in life. That's being badass. That's being able to acknowledge that I don't have the support that I need, but I'm still going to get where I want to go because I don't have a choice. That's what I have to do. So, do I consider her to be badass? Absolutely. So in addition to having quotes from role models like Tina Turner or my favorite Edwidge Danticat, who's a Haitian American writer who's been such an inspiration to me throughout the years, I have a few quotes from her. I have different activities that you can do in order to become a better version of yourself. So one thing that I wanted someone to tell me when I was growing up was what is so great about me, because we get so many messages from the world, people that might think that we're not important enough in the world. And what are some of the things that you can tell yourself? Affirmations are really important. The way you talk about yourself is those ways are important. The different ways you portray yourself to others, but also the way you talk to yourself, right? And I wanted to know what is so great about being who I am. I mean, I look at the TV and all the great stories of portraying people who don't look anything like me. I'm looking at magazines, and on the cover of magazines in the 1990s or in the 2000s, and even now we don't have enough of that, you tend to see people who don't necessarily look like you. So am I beautiful? I don't know if I'm beautiful, because the TV is telling me that in order for me to be beautiful, I need to have certain characteristics that I don't have. I don't see someone with a afro or with black hair braided as in a role that shows power and strength and courage. I'm not saying that there were no black actors, obviously there were, but they were always in minor roles, or you would have the occasional movie with someone who looked like me. And in magazines, all the beauty tips and everything that was portrayed as being beautiful had nothing to do with me. I had this one magazine that focused on black young kids, or black teenagers when I grew up, and they all came from far, far away. There was nothing that was readily accessible. So there were those things that I really wanted to hear. I wanted to hear someone tell me that I had the strength necessary to go on, because everybody needs some kind of pep talk at some point. So what I did in this book, we have several pages. If you open the book to page 148, and you look at 148 and 149, for instance, there are so many reasons that I listed why it's awesome to be a black girl. We're powerful, multifaceted. Our collective perseverance and strength. We're the mothers of humanity and the heroes of the American nation. The tenacity and creativity of black women. So I listed all those reasons that sometimes we may forget. Why is it so great to be a badass black girl? And when I say the word girl, of course, I mean all black women. I'm talking about the girl in all of us, whether we're 15, whether we're in our 20s, whether we're adults. When I say badass black girl, I mean all of us, right? A badass black girls, badass black women. What is so great about us? Well, I remind you in case you forget. We celebrate our beauty together. We have skin that glistens and caramelizes in the sun. we change narratives and we build nations. So all those are amazing reasons why I really love being a Black girl, and reasons why you should as well. Once again, I want to remind all of you that this particular event is being brought to you by the African American Research Library and Cultural Center of the Broward County Library, the Friends of Orlick, and Bank of America. Thank you so much for those of you who are connected. And I wanted to remind you also that you can go ahead and ask questions. If you're watching from Facebook, you can leave comments under the main feed. If you're watching on the website of the African American Research Library, you can ask questions as well. And one of the team members will convey those questions to me so that I can address them. So one question that I have right now is what I'm working on. So for those of you who already have the book, so many of you reach out to me saying that they love the book. What am I working on right now? I'm working on different projects. One of them is another book geared specifically toward young adults. So all of you badass Black girls out there, I'm working on something new that will come out next year. I'll make sure to keep you posted. And I'm also working on a book for parents of Black boys and girls. So I mentioned earlier that I started my studies when I was in Haiti. Then I moved to the United States and I attended Berry University and Florida International University. So I became a more formal writer by attending the creative writing program at Florida International University. But before that, I became a teacher. So I was a teacher for many, many years. I spent more than a year in a kindergarten and first grade class. So it was a K1 combo where I had students from both levels, and I taught there for about a year and a half. And then I became a middle school teacher. I spent 8 years in middle school, and during my time in middle school, I also taught high school credit classes. And then I moved on to college. I started teaching college classes. So I've been an educator all my life, and very often people would come to me and ask me about certain topics. For instance, topics that had to do with bullying, for instance. What do you do when repeatedly you are told that you don't deserve to be around, that maybe you're not as intelligent as other people, you're not as pretty as other people, you're not as smart as other people. What do you do? So I would often meet with parents, but also with the students themselves to kind of discuss things that you can do to counter the impact that others, the negative impact that others are trying to have on your life. And after years and years of talking to parents, of talking to students, of being a mediator sometimes between students who had a disagreement, I realized that there are a lot of strategies that we can use to improve the way we approach our relationship with others. What can I do if I know that I worry too much, for instance, about what other people think? What can I do to change that? So I wanted to give some tips. Those are the things you can do. There are things that you can actually sit down and do. And if you do them every day, you get better at realizing, oh, she's trying to make me feel bad about myself, but I'm not going to let that person do that. I'm going to do this instead. So in addition to having quotes and letters from me to you, to the badass Black girl in you, I also have strategies that you can use. And one strategy is journaling. So for those of you who totally hate writing, this is the kind of writing that you're going to enjoy because it's about you. So you don't have to write about a topic unrelated to you that you really don't care about and you really don't want to write about it. It's about writing about you and helping yourself get what you want from life by writing. So there is a section, for instance, on page 101 called 30 Days of Purpose. And for 30 days, I give you a writing prompt. And every day you write about you, about what you want in life. And trust me, by the end of the month, you're going to have a clear vision of where you're going. Because, I mean, even if it's not in relationship to others, right? I talked earlier about how difficult it can be sometimes to navigate your relationships with others, particularly when other people do not necessarily appreciate you for who you are. But even your relationship with yourself, a lot of us, we don't realize that, but we use a lot of negative self-talk. Like you'll do something and you regret it and you're like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. And you don't realize the power of the words that you're using, calling yourself stupid for one mistake. And you start believing those. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm stupid. I'm slow. I'm unlovable. So many people think they are unlovable, which is very sad because it's not true. So 30 days of purpose, every day, one prompt. For instance, day one, I ask you, what aspects of your life would you like to make changes to? And nobody has to read what you write. So you can really go into it. Maybe you don't like something that's going on at home. When I was growing up, oh my God, when I was growing up, I couldn't wait to be on my own. I wanted to be out of that house on my own because sometimes the atmosphere there was toxic. Yes, I love my parents. I love my family to death. My sisters, I love them so much, but I really wanted to be on my own because a lot of what was going on, I didn't care for, I didn't like. I mentioned that it was chaotic in the home and not in a good way, not the kind of chaos where there are so many of us. It was the four of us, four sisters, plus my parents. It wasn't chaotic because of the sheer number of us kids. It was just chaotic because my parents had a hard time getting along. So I wanted to be out, and if I were writing today, answering this prompt, what aspects of your life would you like to make changes to? I want to be independent enough to be out of the house. And the fact that it was a desire of mine to be on my own, it guided everything else. I knew that, I don't feel like paying attention in class today, but I'm going to, because I know that my best chances to be on my own as soon as possible, to be independent, I'm going to have to be able to go to college. I'm gonna need those grades. So everything was with that purpose. I'm going to focus on what matters so that I can get what I want. So that's one of the prompts. Another one is right this second, what are 4 things that you're thankful about? And this is really important. I talk all the time about the importance of seeing the silver lining in everything. If you're going through a hard time, I mean, there's always a silver lining. A lot of us have lost people we love during this pandemic, for instance. And it's so hard to think about what is positive when you're mourning. People are getting sick. People are losing their lives. People are losing their jobs. There is a lot of negativity going around because the pain is real. But one thing we can remember is, okay, I've lost someone that I really care about. What is their legacy? what have I learned from them, and how can I use those lessons to keep going, right? That would be a silver lining. So gratitude comes with that. It's about seeing things that you can be thankful for. If you've lost somebody, be thankful for the time that you were able to spend with them and the lessons that they taught you in your life. So in the book, I talk a lot about the idea of gratitude, and I offer different exercises that you can do to practice a little bit more of gratitude. One of them that is really, really important is to be able to actually tell the people that you're grateful for that those are your feelings. Calling that friend who's always willing to listen to you when you're having a bad time, and call them not to complain a little bit more about what's going on in your life, but to tell them, you know what, you've always been such a good friend for me. This is what I want you to know. This is how I feel about you. I'm thankful that you're in my life today. Those people that we tend to take for granted, give them a phone call. When is the last time that you called that uncle who never forgets your birthday, who's always sending you what you need? Call them and say, I've been thinking about you today. I wanted to tell you how much I appreciate you. When is the last time that you told your mom that you loved her? When is the last time you told your dad that you loved him? And if they're not around anymore, you can always write them a letter and read it out loud, and somewhere they will be listening. Tell them everything that they brought to you. When you have an attitude of gratitude, it really changes the way you see the world and the way you see yourself, and you become more aware of what you can do, all the blessings that you've received that can help you accomplish even greater things than what you've done before. So that's one lesson that I teach in the book, about making sure that you are grateful for everything you've ever received, and that you let the people know that you're grateful for what they've given you. So talking again about the contents, I told you about the fact that I write several letters to you guys, the badass black girls reading the book. I mentioned the fact that there are quotes from role models, so many role models. So I read a quote from Tina Turner. I have quotes from Zora Neale Hurston, an African American writer who's well known for everything she's accomplished for American literature. I have quotes from Beyonce, from Oprah, all those women were considered trailblazers in so many areas of our lives. And speaking of trailblazers, I also included some of the trailblazers that we have in different domains. So, for instance, who are the badass black girls of business? Some of you might know some of them. I mentioned Oprah, for instance, very amazing businesswoman, right? But there are some other names that don't necessarily come to mind. For instance, if I tell you Beyonce, you're going to think about her career as a singer. You might know that she gives a lot of her time and money to philanthropic enterprises, right? But you don't necessarily think of her as a businesswoman per se, but she is. So she's listed there. Or Rihanna, or Oprah, or Serena Williams, all those names that we associate with certain careers, and we forget that they're also businesswomen, and we can learn from them. We can, if we want to have an empire of our own, we can definitely get some tips from those amazing women. I also have some role models in politics and law. Black women who have really paved the way for other successful Black women in politics. We have trailblazers in sports, in STEM. What are the scientists? What are the Black women who are also scientists? And what exactly have they done? Do you know? You should know, because it is definitely part of your history. I think it's really important for you to know who those trailblazers are. And I want to remind those of you who are listening that if you're looking for an opportunity to make a difference, if you feel that you could be one of those trailblazers, or if you want to follow in the footsteps of those trailblazers, you can let your talents shine to help the community. You can follow the Friends of Orlick and become a member today. If you look at the comments under this Facebook Live, you will find the link that was shared to you. It's an Eventbrite link. You can definitely get more involved, use your talents to change your community. Change is now, change is happening now. There are so many things that you as a young person you can do to help create change. I'm going to read a second portion of the book, and remember that if you have any questions, whether you're watching this on the Happy OK page, which is the official Badass Black Girl page, or you're watching this on the website of the African American Research Library, you can ask questions, and those questions will be sent to me so that I can address them for you. So in the meantime, I'm going to read a second portion, a second segment from the book. And we just talked about talent, right? How you can follow, you can click on that link that the African American Research Library just shared with you. And speaking of talents, here we are, the second segment that I'm reading. Dear Badass Black Girl, when you hear the word talent, the first image you see might be something artistic or creative, knowing how to play the drums, dance, paint, cook, or create super rad jewelry. What if you're not the creative type though? Or you're not the next Maya Moore on the basketball court? What if you're not like your best friend Deja, whose slender ballerina body moves with a mixture of grace and precision, her hair dark and soft, swept back in a smooth roll? What if that's not you? And what if you really have no idea what you're good at, and you feel like you carry this heavy uncertainty like an extra body, a cloak, or a mask that hides you from the world? Of course, there are online tests you can take to help you identify your strengths, but there are 3 no-fail ways to find out what you're awesome at. Don't forget, your best allies are the people who support you and encourage you to excel at what makes you shine. And of course, I elaborate a little bit on those 3 strategies that you can use to find out what your talents are. It's never too late to find out what your talents are. When I was growing up, there were so many things I wanted to try. And I wanted to try them not necessarily because I wanted to do them for my entire life. I just wanted to know if I was good at those things. So I tried becoming a ballerina, I tried basketball, I tried volleyball, I tried the guitar, I tried the piano, I tried becoming a photographer. I mean, you name it, I tried it. I was really curious, and I was lucky to have a very supportive mom who understood that the fact that I try something and I walk away from it, it doesn't mean that that's the kind of person I am, where I'm just trying things and nothing is sticking, really. She knew that I was curious. I wanted to find out what I was good at. So those strategies that I mentioned, some of them involve asking yourself, what are you good at today? What are some things that when you do them, you always get compliments? It could be something simple as you're good around younger kids. Whenever you play with younger kids, they get all excited, and the parents are always like, oh my God, Stephanie, you're really good at this. You should consider working with kids. And maybe you never really paid attention, but now I'm going to ask you to start paying attention and start making a list of things that you're really good at. Maybe you're good at cooking and you've never considered, oh, I could do that professionally. But whenever you make a cake, it's like the best thing ever. Your neighbor wants you to make dessert for their event. Maybe your mom is always begging you to help at home because she says that there's something special about the way you make dishes. Start paying attention. Maybe you're a good listener. Whenever someone has a problem, they call you. And after they call you, they tell you, oh my God, you make me feel so much better. Maybe that's your talent. And maybe you should consider doing something that involves listening. Maybe you're supposed to be a counselor. Or maybe you're supposed to be one of those radio hosts that listen to people on certain talk shows. You listen to your audience, and then you address their questions. Maybe that's what you're supposed to do. Now, think about yesterday. By yesterday, I don't mean literally yesterday, but years past. What were things that made you feel like you were having the best time of your life? For instance, do you remember maybe having a blast helping in the community? Or maybe your best time was when you did a group activity at your church or at school or with just friends hanging out. What are those situations that really made you happy? Maybe years ago you remember being at camp and doing something artistic, and you cannot stop thinking about that memory. You at camp drawing or painting. So maybe that's what's important to you. Maybe being artistic is what is important to you. Maybe working in a group setting is what is important to you. Or maybe you went you went mountain climbing for the first time. Maybe something physical that involves the outdoors is what you want in your life. There are so many things that we don't pay attention to. They bring us joy, but we don't think about how we could use them specifically to bring more joy in the careers that we choose, in the ways that we decide to spend the rest of our life. So you need to think about yesterday. So think about today. What are you good at today? What are the compliments you get? Pay attention and think about yesterday. What are those things that are still with you? The memories of those events are still with you because you were happy, very happy then. So think about that. But also, the third category is all the freaking time. That's literally the name that I give that category. So not things that happen occasionally, not things that happen yesterday, but what are things that you always do well? Simple. Maybe you're always on time. It doesn't matter what you're doing, you're always on time. Maybe you're always organized. It doesn't matter if it's a Monday or a Sunday. You know exactly, this is how my day is gonna go. At 8, I do this. Or maybe I'm gonna wake up at 10. At 10, I'm going to do this. It's a quality that you should be paying attention to. And you need to ask yourself, okay, what kind of future do I want that is going to allow me to be very organized, or that is going to allow me to use that skill in order for me to to really leverage that skill that I have, right? So thinking about what you do well today, what you did well yesterday, and what you do well all the time. So all those you can find in the book. I mean, and inspiration, you have it. Activities, you have it. Journal prompts. The book is really a book for you, the badass black girl that lives inside of you is begging to come out. You might not think that you're badass right now, but you are. It's just a matter of letting that person, that motivated, that forceful girl come out of her shell. It might not happen overnight. It might not happen next month. It's something that requires you to work on it all the time before it becomes reality. Once again, if you have any questions, make sure you ask them in the comments. Even if I don't address them on video, I'll be happy to leave some answers for you. Thank you again for joining us. Please let us know how you've been enjoying the South Florida Book Festival. There is a link in the comments that leads you to a survey to let people know how you've enjoyed that presentation. We're here to serve you. I want to remind you that this activity is made possible by the African American Research Library and Cultural Center of Broward County Library, Bank of America, and the Friends of our Lick. And you can show your support for these great organizations by filling out the survey, by attending their next event. We talked about showing off your talent. You can find more information in the comments under this video. Thank you so much for coming today. It was my pleasure to talk to you about Badass Black Girl. Please support. It's available on Amazon. It's been a bestseller in 3 different categories in the US and the UK. I will put a link as a comment under this video so that you can find it. So that you can find the book, and feel free to visit my website at badassblackgirl.com, and I'm on Facebook at Badass Black Girl. Thank you so much for being here today. It was a real pleasure to tell you a little bit about my career, my writing career, a little bit about my life in Haiti and in the United States. And it was a pleasure, of course, to talk to you about Badass Black Girl. Be well.